All right, folks, this is Mr. O'Brien, and welcome to Martin Luther King's Letters from a Birmingham Jail, one of his most famous texts. All right, it wasn't exactly a speech. He actually wrote it on the margins of a newspaper that was smuggled into him by his lawyer. All right, so this would be, again, document 4, MLK's Letter from a Birmingham Jail. For many of these documents, I will read through the head note with you, but I won't for this one. Think back to the Children's Crusade video we watched. If you remember, that's the one where the children were attacked by fire hoses and police dogs, German shepherds, and a big white tank. 50 to Tom coming out of the 16th Street Baptist Church, so on and so forth. Remember, this is the one where Dr. King shows up in Birmingham in 1963 and is having trouble getting adult African Americans to march for their voting rights and try and end segregation. And he gets arrested on purpose to try and motivate them to join him. And it was during this jail time that he wrote Letters from a Birmingham Jail. All right. When he actually shows up in Birmingham, he gets criticized by local civil rights leaders. All right. As kind of like an outside troublemaker, they call him somewhat. They also urged Dr. King to let the lawmakers in Birmingham kind of do the right thing. They were just elected, give them time to do what is right. So they were somewhat critical of him, in a friendly way, but critical of him. And he was kind of hurt by this when he read this in the newspaper. It was published in the local newspaper. And this letter is his reply to those clergymen. That's why it begins, if you look on page 17, my dear fellow clergymen. All right. That's who he's answering in the margins of the newspaper. All right, so let's get to the questions. All right. Find the answer. All right. So the first question is, does King consider himself an outsider by staging a civil rights protest in Birmingham? And I ask you to list 3 reasons. All right, so let's go to the text. All right, if you go to the beginning of the speech, all right, the first thing he says is, I was asked to show up here. All right, so if you look at the second paragraph, it begins, I think I should. So he begins by writing, I think I should give the reason for my being in Birmingham. Since you have been influenced, and the you, remember, is the clergymen that were critical of him, you have been influenced by the argument of outsiders coming in. I have the honor of serving as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, and organizing an organization operating in every southern state with headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. We have some 85 affiliate organizations all across the South, one being the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. Whenever necessary and possible, we share staff, educational, and financial resources with our affiliates. Ending the paragraph, several months ago, our local affiliate here in Birmingham invited us to be on the call to engage in a nonviolent direct action program if such were deemed necessary. So I am here along with several members of my staff because I have basic organizational ties here. So the first reason he gives is I was invited by the local chapter of the SCLC, and it's the last sentence in the second paragraph. I was asked to, but if you continue, let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see a little bit better. Try 125. All right, so in the third paragraph, moreover, and this is a very famous line here, I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. And this is a very, very famous line. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. All right, so those first few sentences in the second paragraph are his second reason. All right, an injustice anywhere, sorry, I didn't mean to highlight all of that. An injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. So he's kind of, again, making an existential argument here that we're all in this together. All right, we're not to be socially atomized or overly individualistic. If one person is less than free, I'm less than free, is what Dr. King is saying here. And again, it would make me very happy to see this line in your final paper. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Okay? That's his second reason. So the third reason he gives is the last sentence in that third paragraph. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the U.S. can never be considered an outsider anywhere in this country. So he's basically saying Birmingham is in the U.S., and I'm a citizen of the U.S., so technically I'm not an outsider. It was also a common argument made by Southerners, even during the Reconstruction era, when they would talk about Northern Republicans. If you remember, they called them carpetbaggers, carpetbag being in a suitcase kind of thing. Outside troublemakers, those Northern Republicans coming down here and making trouble, or Union soldiers. So they were just kind of rehashing an argument from the Reconstruction era, blaming or calling out civil rights activists outside agitators. Okay, so that's the first question. Let's get to the second question. All right, the 4-step process King outlines for his nonviolent campaign. Let's go back to the text. All right, it's numbered right here for you, nice and easy. Let me make it even a little bit bigger here. Okay, so in the next paragraph, which would be 4th paragraph down, here we go. In any nonviolent campaign, there are 4 basic steps. Here we have it, nice and easy for you. I'm sure you got it right. Number 1, collection of the facts to determine whether injustices are alive. Number 2, negotiation. All right, negotiate with the, quote, city fathers or the lawmakers. Give them one last chance to do the right thing. Number 3, self-purification. That's in a subsequent question, but more or less it means training yourself to be nonviolent. And number 4, direct action, whether that be picketing or marching or sit-ins, what have you. So again, show up. Number 1, see if injustice is there. Number 2, negotiate with the lawmakers if that doesn't work. Number 3, get ready to act. Number 3, train yourself to be peaceful. Number 4, act, direct action. All right, so that's the 4-step process. And that's what happened in Birmingham. He showed up and learned about all the bombs in the past. Remember, his nickname was Bombingham. Complete segregation from life to death. So it was obvious it was going to be needed. All right. And in the next question on page 19, I ask you to briefly explain steps 3 and 4. All right. So let's go back to the text again. And he goes into further detail about step 3 and 4. All right. All right. So if we go down to the paragraph that begins, so we had no alternative. I believe it's the 5th paragraph down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So we had no alternative except that of preparing for direct action against Birmingham was so segregated and unjust, whereby we would present our very bodies as a means of laying our case before the conscience of the local and national community, meaning draw attention to what was going on. We were aware of the difficulties involved, so we decided to go through a process of self-purification. We started having workshops on nonviolence and repeatedly asked ourselves the questions, are you able to accept blows without retaliating? Are you able to endure the ordeals of jail? We decided to set our direct action program around the Easter season, realizing that with the exception of Christmas, this was the largest shopping period of the year. We felt that this was the best time to bring pressure on the merchants, store owners, for the needed changes. So this notion of self-purification, which is step 3, all right, they would literally have training sessions. They would train themselves to be peaceful even when they were being harassed, having things yelled at them, things thrown at them, and brutalized in other more violent ways. They were training themselves to be nonviolent because that's not the normal human response. That's what I would like you to jot down. Okay? The normal human response is to defend yourself. but that was not what King saw as the way for the movement to become successful or to be successful. Since being peaceful was not the natural human reaction, they had to train themselves to remain peaceful. Okay. Let's go to the next paragraph. You may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, etc.? Isn't negotiation a better path? And again, he's speaking to the clergy members here. You are exactly right in your call for negotiation. Indeed, this is step 4, this is the purpose of direct action. Non-violent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks so to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. I have preached against violent tension, but there is a type of constructive and non-violent tension that is necessary for growth. So the purpose of the direct action is to create a situation so crisis-packed that it will inevitably open the door to negotiation. We therefore concur with you in your call for negotiation. Too long has our beloved Southland been bogged down in the tragic attempt to live in monologue rather than dialogue. So step 4, he's basically saying that his marches, his sit-ins, they seek to create such a tension, a nonviolent tension, such a crisis, and expose the tension that is already there beneath the surface. All right, and try to create a situation so tension-packed that the white lawmakers have no choice but to negotiate. All right, and that's the purpose of nonviolent direct action. All right, force them to the table when they normally wouldn't be willing to go to the table to negotiate. All right, so that's steps 3 and 4 in more depth. All right, so the clergyman, next question on page 19. The clergyman argued that the new governmental administration of Alabama should be given time to act. What was King's response? Let's go to the next paragraph here. All right. Here we have it. So this would be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th paragraph down. One of the basic points in your statement, again, the clergyman, is that our acts are untimely. Some have asked, quote, why didn't you give the new administration in Birmingham time to act? The only answer that I can give to this inquiry is that we know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And that's your answer right there. All right. Again, those who had me last year for USM1 may remember Frederick Douglass. There's no progress without struggle speech. All right, when he said power never concedes anything without a demand, it never has, never will. It's meaning those in power will not give it to you. You've got to demand it and take it. All right, so that's what he means by this. All right, the white lawmakers are not just going to give us the end of segregation. We've got to demand it and make them do it. All right, so that's that question. All right, so if King admits that breaking laws in order to change them is, quote, a legitimate concern, how does he still justify civil disobedience? Also explain how King thought a law can be disobeyed without leading to anarchy. All right, you may remember Thoreau from last year. This is where King gets it, from Thoreau. Okay, all right, so even the next paragraph, right, at the top of page, I think it's bottom of page 17. Paragraph that begins, you express a great deal. You express a great deal of anxiety over our willingness to break laws. This is certainly a legitimate concern, since we so diligently urge people to obey the Supreme Court's decision of 1954, Brown v. Board, outlawing segregation in the public schools. It is rather strange to find us consciously breaking laws. One may well ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer is found in the fact, and here it is, there are 2 types of laws. There are just laws and there are unjust laws. I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. Now, what is the difference between the two? How does someone determine when a law is just or unjust? An unjust law is a code or a law here's your answer, that is out of harmony with the moral law. Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. All segregation statutes are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality of all. Hence, segregation is morally wrong and awful. Thus, I can urge men to obey the 54 decision of the Supreme Court, for it is morally right, and I can urge them to disobey segregation ordinances, for they are morally wrong. In no sense do I advocate defying the law as the rabid segregationists would do. This would lead to anarchy. One who breaks an unjust law must do it openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the penalty. Again, think back to Thoreau from last year. I submit that an individual who breaks a law that is unjust and willingly accepts the penalty by staying in jail to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the very highest respect for law. So here's what he says. Not every law is just. If it's unjust, if it's immoral, it is your duty to break it. All right, and again, he argues this will not lead to anarchy because I'm not saying we should break laws all willy-nilly. It's got to be a big deal. It's got to be unjust. If it distorts the human personality, if it's morally incorrect, it's unjust. And you must be willing to accept the penalty. Because remember, the purpose is to draw attention to the unjust law. So you've got to get caught, and you've got to fill the jails, as the civil rights movement did. Okay? And King argues if you do this, it is your duty to do this. And if you do it, you're actually showing respect for the law. You're trying to make it better by criticizing it. All right, if you look at the next paragraph on page 18, he even talks about the Holocaust. We can never forget that everything Hitler did was legal in Germany. It was illegal in Germany back then to aid and comfort a Jew in Hitler's Germany. But he says he is sure that if he was in Germany during that time, he would have aided and comforted his Jewish brothers, even though it was illegal. So he draws a sharp contrast between what's legal and what's moral, the same way Thoreau did, and Thoreau was his inspiration for this. All right. Explain why King thinks the tension stirred up by his protest movement promotes social and political reform. In other words, is he the creator of the tension? Is King the one creating the tension? Kind of, again, he's entering this outside agitator argument here. All right. And again, this is the very next paragraph after the Nazi comparison. The one that begins, actually, we who engage. And here we have it. Actually, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. We bring it out in the open, where it can be seen and dealt with like a boil that can never be cured as long as it is covered up, but must be opened with all its pus-flowing ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must likewise be exposed with all the tension its exposing creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. So again, he's saying, I'm not going to be gaslit here. I'm not the one creating the tension. I'm exposing the tension that's already there to help it heal. It cannot heal unless it's exposed. So he very quickly dismisses that question. All right. All right. So how does King respond to the charge that he is an extremist? Whom does he identify as the real extremists? All right. And in this one, he's kind of comparing himself to other civil rights activists. And I'm not going to go back to the text for this one. All he basically says is he claims he is the middle ground. All right. On one end, he claims that there are African Americans that have achieved a level of success, whether it be material or what have you, professional success, and are willing to let things exist the way they are, and they've become kind of complacent. All right. On the other side, he says the extreme of these more violent black nationalists he's talking about. And, he doesn't even really say his name, but he's talking about Malcolm X. All right. Actually, let me see if he does say his name. Now I do have to go back to the text. All right. Well, I put his name in there. These are, when it's in brackets, it's my addition. So he calls it Elijah Muhammad's Black Muslim Movement right here. And Malcolm X, at this point in his life, was part of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad's movement. So it basically says he's the middle person between the complacent African American and the more angry, violent African American, Malcolm X or the Black National Movement. All right. So that is document 4.